Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Manifesting Muslimah. I'm your host, Zara Pedersen, and today we're going to talk about surrender manifesting. I have already tried to record this episode like 10 times and something or another happens, and now I'm like, you know what, I'm going to surrender it. So very much apropos what I'm going to talk about today, because I'm trying to micromanage and I'm trying to resist what's happening in the background and all the stuff. And you know what? Maybe this is a very good point for me to just kind of continue. So let me talk a little bit about what it is that we're going to talk about today and get into the subject. And then maybe thinking back on what I just said now, you might be like, okay, that kind of makes sense. Okay, so let's go into it. So surrender manifesting. This is such an interesting topic because this is something that I think most of us struggle with, is the surrendering it back to Allah. In mainstream law of attraction, they teach this step, but they call it detachment. You know, detach yourself from it. Detach yourself from the thing that you want. And one of I was struggling personally before I found law of attraction from an Islamic perspective. I was struggling with a lot of the things in terms of law of attraction because I couldn't make it make sense inside of me. But that was because before that, I didn't have Allah in the way that I have Allah now. And so I was, of course, struggling with a lot of things, and a lot of things didn't make sense to me because I was lacking the piece of the puzzle that was the most important piece of the puzzle, which was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there was a lot of things, not just with law of attraction, but with other things in my life that I was struggling to make sense of because I was missing the ultimate piece of the puzzle. But when it came to law of attraction, this step specifically confused me so much because I found it to be a bit of an oxymoron, because one of the ways that mainstream law of attraction teaches you to want to, and listen, this is also, by the way, the same in Islam, but there's a massive twist to this. So, you know, keep that in mind. So I'm not teaching much different, but there's a massive element, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is the difference here. And it makes a big difference personally to me, and I think it will also to you. So in mainstream law of attraction, they teach you need to want something, like you be specific, know what it is, when you want it by, all that good stuff. And so you need to want it to the point where you know it's going to come with certainty. You just know this is already a done deal. There's no questioning it. It's already coming, right? It's kind of the same that we're doing in Islamic law of attraction, but of course we have some caveats to that and little loopholes because we understand that we're not creators, and so we know that we are answering to a higher power, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So of course, while we can know and understand that Allah answers all du'as, and when we make the dua and we wish for something and hope for something and ask for something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we also understand that we cannot demand something of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is ultimately, while Allah has promised to answer our duas, it's still up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to decide whether or not He wants to give you this thing. And so there is that little caveat, of course. But that's not the detachment part. The detachment part is wanting it so much, but then at the same time, detaching yourself from it. So I'm going to try and explain what the way that I've understood it for all these years, and maybe I got it completely wrong. I don't think I did, because I spend a lot of time trying to understand the detachment. So it is wanting it so much that you know it's going to come, and taking inspired action and reminding yourself of your goal and all this stuff, but at the same time not caring if it comes. Detaching yourself to the point where you're like, I don't even care if it's coming my way or not. Like, it doesn't even matter to me, kind of thing. Like, to the point where it's like, it feels like an oxymoron, because I can't want something so bad and at the same time detach myself to the point where I don't care if it comes into my life. And again, like, I'm going to put a little editor's note here, or whatever you want to call it, and say, without Allah. Okay, so I can't be in that vibe without Allah. Okay, so let me explain what this then looks like from an Islamic perspective, because detachment in mainstream law of attraction, the way that I understand it, is you don't want the desperate energy for it. You don't want the desperation. The desperate energy basically repels it, because desperation comes from lack, a lack mindset. So, you know, I understand the theories of it, don't get me wrong, but it's the the being in that mood or in that feeling that I was struggling with personally. And I know that a lot of other people can struggle with this, which is why I'm sitting down and making this specific episode and explanation today. So I understand the theory and the general understanding of why that makes sense and why it is there. But as humans, to be in that energy and to emit that kind of frequency of vibration. Sorry, I need to turn on my aircon because it's quite hot in here. That is something that can feel very contradictive. Is that the word, contradictive? Within ourselves, because it's hard for us to both want something and then also not care if it comes. Okay. And want something so bad that you know and believe and trust that it's going to come, and then at the same time being like, but even if it doesn't come, I don't care. And it's like, but what? Okay, anyway, I think I've kind of muddled around in that little chapter long enough. So when we're looking at this aspect from an Islamic perspective, this is where, for me personally, and I think for a lot of you, it's going to start making a lot more sense. Because again, we are not using the law of attraction from a place where we are gods and goddesses and creators or even co-creators. And we're not looking to the universe to be this all-knowing, all-creating power. Rather, we're looking at the universe as a creation itself. And so a lot of things from an Islamic perspective makes more sense because there's an ultimate force, an ultimate power, and that ultimate force and power is actually constantly communicating with us and has communicated directly with people on this earth, i.e. the prophets, alayhim salam. And, so we have some more like concrete sort of like, yes, this is a power that is speaking to us. This is the deity that we need to follow and surrender ourselves to, right? So from an Islamic perspective, it is not called detachment. It is called surrender. You surrender. It's basically also like submitting yourself to Allah. And when you submit to Allah, you're also surrendering to Allah. And surrendering is basically the moment where you're saying, in many ways, depending on what the situation is, I'm trusting that Allah knows better than I do. It's the point where you're like, I know that I am not powerful enough or knowing enough or intelligent or whatever enough to make certain decisions or to create things for myself or whatever it might be. So it is easier then for me to submit to something that is far greater than I and surrender to this divinity's powers and knowing and will. And that is what we do constantly as Muslims, right? And when we use the law of attraction, the surrender aspect becomes important because, as I mentioned a bit earlier, we are not the creators. So while we can use the law of attraction, we understand that we are not the ones creating our own reality. We have something far greater than us in our lives that is creating our reality on our behalf. And that is the divinity that we're asking for things of. And when we are asking, and remember I said asking of things of, I'm not saying demanding of things of, as I mentioned as well, we're also surrendering and understanding that this is the will of Allah, not our will. So while we have free will and we can change our qadrs and we can make dua, ultimately we still understand and acknowledge that Allah's will comes before our wills, and Allah's will always surpass ours and be far greater than ours, because Allah's will is based in true knowledge, in true wisdom, in true understanding, whereas ours is based on what mood we're in, what we're influenced by, who we're following, the groups we're in, our environment, our economic status, whatever, so on and so forth, right? So for me personally, it makes so much more sense, this surrendering aspect, because another thing that happens here is I'm not releasing it to nothing. I'm not releasing my thing to nothing or detaching from it, as it were, in mainstream law of attraction to nothing. Because that is the one thing, again, as I said, like in the mainstream law of attraction that I was struggling so much with, is where am I detaching it to? Like, so I'm just kind of like throw it, like I'm wanting it so bad, and then at the same time, I'm just throwing it out. And that's the difference in Islamic law of attraction, is I'm not throwing anything out. I'm passing it over to a far greater creator than I could ever pretend to be, and a far greater source and understanding and knowledge and power and infinite wisdom than I could ever hold ever in my life, in this or in the hereafter. So I am releasing it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that surrender, that moment there when I say, I really want this, Allah, and I'm surrendering it to Allah, I'm not detaching from it. And I think it makes, to me, it's such a huge shift in mindset and understanding and in energy that I've never detached from the thing that I so truly want. What I am doing, however, is I am handing it over to a source and a power far greater than myself. And I say, I know you can do much better with it than I ever could. And that right there is not a question of me detaching or throwing it away or not wanting it or removing desperate energy. It is me saying, I know you can do better with it. So my personal mindset and feeling and everything within me is at rest, is at peace, knowing that I have handed my greatest desires over to the ultimate creator who can do far greater with it. So I know that I will either get it back exactly the way that I want it or even better. And that right there makes the difference. It is that point of knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to just be like, no, I'm not going to give it to you. He's either going to say, not yet, or he's going to say, yes, but I'm going to add some things to it, or it's going to look a little bit different, but it's going to be for the right reasons, and it's going to benefit you even more as my servant, and it's going to make your dunya far greater and better and more pleasing to me as your creator, right? And so it's such a beautiful place to come at this surrendering from, and in the steps of law of attraction, because there's so much, I feel like, more reassurance. There's so much more reassurance in surrendering it than detaching from it. And listen, I know that some of you might be like, but Zara, it's just a question of words. It's more than that. Again, because from a mainstream teaching of law of attraction, detaching is not talking about God. I mean, some of them are like, call it God, call it angels, call it universe. No, it's not about that. I don't want to, like, I need a definitive, like, I need to know what I am giving it up to. And this sort of like wishy-washy, not non-committal speech about whether or not it's the universe or your ancestors or, you know, whatever they teach in mainstream law of attraction is just not certain enough for me. And I'm the kind of person who needs that certainty. I need to know what I am releasing it to. And so having the word differences matter. It matters greatly. And I also want to just kind of like a little side note here, say words in general matter so much. And I say this all the time. If you're in my membership, you know this, because I'm constantly saying to all of the members in there, when they say something, I'm like, hey, let's just try and say that differently, or that's not what's actually happening. This is what's, so I'm correcting their language all the time, not because I want to be a stickler or I want to be annoying or want to be that person, but because the words that we speak matters greatly in the way that it vibrates out and how we're essentially surrendering or releasing it or detaching from it, right? Because it's a vibe, it's an energy, and it's a frequency, and it's a mindset. And if we don't know and understand the detachment aspect of what we're detaching it ourselves from and how and where to, it's going to come from a level of uncertainty within us. When we're submitting or surrendering something to Allah and releasing it to Allah, there's so much more certainty, because there's an understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made certain promises to us in the Quran and in the Hadiths. So there are certain promises that has been made to us, so we can with certain certainty release something to Allah and detach ourselves from something to Allah's will. But understanding that makes a massive difference, because it changes the place and the mindset and the energy in which we're doing it from. And that matters greatly. So maybe I should make, let me just, the words we speak. That's going to be Thursday's episode. I'm going to talk about that in Thursday's episode, about the words we speak and all of that stuff, because now I'm like sitting here like, yeah, I should definitely talk about that a little bit more. Okay, so coming back onto the subject, sorry, that's my mind. I think I might be ADHD, I'm not sure. But anyway, so coming back to the topic at hand, let's talk a little bit about this whole aspect of surrender manifestation. So surrender manifestation, in case you're thinking like, what is this now? This is a whole new way of manifesting? No, absolutely not. There's law of attraction. That's the way to manifest. But if, as I said, if you've read my book, Manifesting Muslimah, you'll understand that I use a 7-step framework to use the law of attraction. And each step is important. But you can delve deeper into each of the steps and manifest from each of those steps. That doesn't exclude any of the other steps, but each one of us might be more inclined to like, I need more of this in my manifestation journey, or I need more of that in my manifestation journey. Each step, as I said, is of course really important and is a part of the journey, but we can kind of be like, I need more of the clarity of what I want. So you might have to delve deeper into, understanding and being precise on what your goals actually are. For some people, everything makes sense except they don't sit down and make the dua. And so that's the step that they're going to delve in even more deeper into. So they're going to sit down and make more du'as and really delve into that step. And that's not to exclude any of the other steps. Again, it just means that you might fall deeper into one. So surrender manifestation is just one of those 7 steps in the framework that you can delve further into, which as I said, I believe many of us probably need to do a little bit of work on, because it is potentially the step where most of us have little hiccups and we're finding it a little bit difficult, because there has to be that level of releasing it back to Allah and Allah's will. And while I don't want to come here and be like, you don't believe enough or anything like that, but the main issue here is that there is a level of tawakkul that is required when we're surrendering something back to Allah that can be very difficult to maintain. That's not to say that you don't have it or that I don't have it, this level of tawakkul, but it's to say to maintain that level of tawakkul I'm not even going to call it a skill, but it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Let's just put it that way. For most of us, because we do get caught up in this dunya and we do want what we want, and the ego gets ahead of us, and the waswas sometimes comes in, and shaitan whispering in our ears, and pressure from family, society, whatever. And so sometimes this tawakkul, if some things aren't coming as quickly as we want or in the way that we want, it's very easy for us to kind of come out of that tawakkul from time to time and ask why, or question it, or be a little upset or frustrated or whatever, instead of just resting assuredly in the fact that Allah, that there are no coincidences. So if he sent something looking a specific way, it was meant to look that way. So the level of tawakkul needed to really practice surrender manifestation is, it's definitely one of the more challenging things. And I would argue for a lot of people now, again, as I said, like from my perspective, that's a phone call that I can call that person back in a minute. I'm very busy and important. She thought that's the only phone call I've received today. Okay, anyway. The level of tawakkul has to be quite great. And I think having been in this industry now for a while and received a lot of feedback and questions and comments from a lot of you, and from the coachings and the group memberships and everything like that, this is also the part that we tend to trip up on the most, because, as I said, we are creatures who we need more reassurance in a lot of ways. So we want to know why. So if somebody asks me, well, I really want this thing, but it hasn't come. Why hasn't it come? And I say, tawakkul. I can't answer the questions for you. Tawakkul. Allah, it's a part of the plan. But why? But I need it now. Why? So there's that level of like uncertainty still. So, and that's where the tawakkul has to come in. The tawakkul has to come in and be like, I don't need to know why. Allah needs to know why. And I just need to trust in Allah and have that faith in Allah, have that tawakkul in Allah. And that should be my reassurance and rest. And while we can intellectually understand this, sometimes being in that energy is the thing that is most difficult for us. So what I want to do is actually share. Oh wait, one more thing about surrender manifestation is there's a level of or one of the easiest ways to really practice this tawakkul and this surrender is by stop resisting it. Stop resisting what's coming. And I know that can sound a little bit sort of like, oh, what do you mean by that? I mean, and I will explain it. You'll see the examples of it when I tell you about the story of how I've basically been using surrender manifestation to manifest a whole life now here in Sicily, which is so pleasing, and alhamdulillah, I'm so happy with. But yeah, so you'll see all of these aspects coming in as I'm sharing that story of how I manifested all of these things using surrender manifestation. So when I say stop resisting is if you're asking for something from Allah and Allah deliberately sends you something that looks different or something completely opposite, stop resisting it. And resisting it would mean that you're avoiding it, or you think that Allah is doing something wrong or that you're doing something wrong. Instead, embrace it. Walk into it with open arms almost. And I know this can sound a little bit scary. And again, when I share my story, it might make more sense what I mean about this, because it's kind of a difficult thing to explain, because there has to be, again, a lot of tawakkul, but there also has to be a great part of self-understanding and self-reflection, and also intuition. You have to really know yourself. And so again, this is why this surrender manifestation can be a little bit difficult for some people to begin with, but honestly, it's so much fun once you get started with it, because you really get to know yourself, and you really get to see Allah's plan really come to fruition for you in actually much faster than most things in your life ever has. Excuse me. Oh, I just had to burp. What is this? I've already said I'm not resisting. So they're all actually, there you go. Very apropos at the beginning. Like, as I said, like I re-recorded the beginning and everything, and so now I'm just kind of running with it. And so while a part of me is like, oh, Zara, you need to re-record, or you've been fumbling on some of your words or whatever, I'm just going to run with it, because clearly Allah is like, okay, you want us to talk about surrender manifestation, surrender to this, just let it come out, and trust that it's going to come out the way it's going to come out, and that the way it comes out will speak to the right people. So I'm trusting and having that tawakkul that what I'm saying and sharing in this episode today is going to come out the way it's meant to come out for the people who need to hear it. Okay, so if that's you, listen up, my darling, this one is specifically for you. So okay, so but yeah, as I said, like at the beginning of the episode, like I'm not resisting any of it anymore. So I'm just going to let it flow and trust that it's going to reach the audience that it needs to reach and the people it needs to reach, and that you'll take from it what you need to take from this episode in order for you to evolve in your journey towards Allah, okay? And in this dunya, inshallah, and in the akhirah, inshallah, bi'idhnillah. Okay, so let me tell you my story about using surrender manifestation. So a little while ago, like around maybe 6 months ago, I was using my 7-step framework, and I had made my goals, and I was like, this is what I want, but it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening. So I was taking action towards the things that I wanted. This was specifically a move back to England. And I was like looking for apartments, and I was getting in contacts with real estate agents, and like constantly like trying to take these steps and actions, because my lease was running up in Spain. And I was like, okay, I feel like this is my next step. This is what I want. I'm very clear on what it is exactly that I want it for, and blah, blah, blah. And it just wasn't happening. And in the end, I was like, okay, the timeline kind of came and went, the deadline was there, and I had to move out of my place in Spain. And I was like, okay, I don't have a place in England. What is going on? Because clearly, like, have I lost my ability to manifest or like make dua or something? No, of course not. But what I then did was I was like, okay, clearly I need some more time. So I rented a place, another place in Spain, because my lease, as I said, was up in my house in Spain. And so I rented an Airbnb in another part of Spain. And I was like, okay, I need to figure out now what I'm going to do, because clearly this thing in the UK is not happening. So it was a time for me was like, okay, I need to just reassess what's the next step. And because this was very pertinent for me, like in terms of like, this wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to need I keep coming back to this example, new pair of winter boots. This was like a very, like, I need a place to live. Am I going to move to Denmark, which I definitely didn't want to do? Am I going to stay Spain? Am I going to move to the UK? Am I going to continue traveling? I had so many options available to me still. And I needed to make a decision on, okay, what direction do I want to go in? And it just so happened to coincide with the month of Ramadan when my lease was up, and I had like a month where I basically was like, okay, I need to figure out what to do. So in the month of Ramadan this year, I deliberately was like, okay, I'm just going to focus on my fast, and I'm not going to worry too much about what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make my du'as and my salahs and pray and do all the things and fasting, and I'm just going to pray that Allah inspires me with something. So I basically was like, I'm going to release it all. Like I'm going to let go of everything, like reset, factory reset my mind and be like, okay, clearly what you're wanting is not the time for it yet. And listen, that's very important. So it's not that the thing that I was praying for is not meant for me. It's just my mind was too far ahead in the plan. So it might very well still come in the future, but it wasn't for what is happening right now. It wasn't that it was supposed to happen right now. So, and I got all the signals and signs for it because nothing lined up when I was trying to manifest this move to the UK. So nothing lined up. Every time I found a place that I wanted, it was either too expensive, or they wouldn't allow pets, or the renting period was too short or too long, or the letting agent didn't like me or whatever. Like there was always something. And so clearly it never aligned. It just never aligned. Where if you want something, it's going to align. You're going to find that the doors are opening. It's going to, while there might be obstacles, it's still aligning. It is still aligning. And it didn't for me. So I was like, okay, it's not aligning. And the thing is not happening. So I'm clearly not in alignment with what Allah wants for me right now. So in the month of Ramadan, I really took that step back, and I just focused on Ramadan, and I just focused on, you know, just kind of living in that every day. And then one day I was like, I had this thought in my mind where I was like, okay, you know what? I kind of want to, I just don't want to spend a ton of money right now. Like I kind of want to continue traveling. I feel like there's other parts of Europe that I want to see and I haven't seen. And there's a part of me that feels the need to continue traveling and experiencing other parts of Europe. And in that, I was thinking, oh, but traveling is so expensive. And because I'm driving, by the way, like, you know, if you know, I'm driving around. So I was like, doing a road trip is really expensive. So if I need to see stuff, I need to live really, really cheap, if not for free. And so in that moment, when I had that thought, I was like, yes, I need to live for free. I'm going to have to manifest a free stay. And I was like, how am I going to manifest a free stay? And then immediately in my mind, there was this thought, work away. And Workaway, in case you don't know, is a website online. I think it's called workaway.net, where you can sign up as either a host or a workawayer. Yeah, so you can basically travel to other people's homes or countries, and then they'll set you up with a place to stay, usually also with food, and then you do a little bit of tasks, a little bit of work for them, and then otherwise you're basically living for free with them. And I did this back in 2000 and I want to say 18, and I traveled for a year around Europe with my dog Doodle. And I did workaways, and I was basically traveling. I'd saved up £2,000 and I was traveling otherwise for free because, like, I was, you know, other than the actual commute from place to place, like, I was living for free and eating for free, and I was still experiencing. I went to Norway on a 3-month stay where I worked on a husky farm because they do those husky sled tours to see the northern lights and all that good stuff. And I was there in the summer taking care of the animals and all that good stuff and the farm and things like that. Then I went to France and I was a childminder and dog sitter for a family in France in a tiny little village in the south of France. It was absolutely wonderful, and I was there for about, I think, a month or two. I can't remember. I was in Bosnia, living up in a mountain just off of Sarajevo, and I was living up in this cabin with, like, no electricity, basically, no internet, no phone connection, no nothing, no heating. And it was really scary. That's a whole story for another time. Not my best stay, but, like, it's definitely an experience, and I learned a lot about myself. But, you know, yeah, definitely one of my more unpleasant travels as a solo female traveler. But I also made one of my most darling friends on that trip as well. I was in, where did I go? I also went to Croatia, and I stayed for a few months in Croatia, and I worked for a family there, like a little family out in Karlovac. And so it's inland, and it was such a beautiful Christian family, and the wife and the husband, they were so sweet, and it was the easiest work. I just had to like paint a door and then go help pull some weeds in the garden, and the rest of the time we just kind of went swimming in one of the rivers, and like it was just so beautiful. Anyway, the point is that I was traveling around and I was seeing a lot of Europe for very, very, very cheap. And so this thought came back to my mind as I was sitting there thinking, I need to be able to travel cheap, because I don't want to keep paying for Airbnbs and stuff, and I don't want to, like, I need a, like, when I travel Airbnbs, I want a place to stay on my own. And so I was like, Workaway. And it just kind of came to me. And at that point, I had been looking for an Airbnb as well, because my lease was coming, or the Airbnb that I was staying at that point was already running out. So I had to go to another place. And so I was looking for Airbnbs when this thought came to me of the Workaway. And at this point, I'd actually rented another Airbnb, and I was thinking, okay, I'll do it after this Airbnb. So what actually happened was, on that day when the Workaway thought hit me and I went on workaway.net and I was looking for a place to stay, I got an email that said that the Airbnb host for my next trip had cancelled. And I was like, oh no, what's going on? And I had to leave, I think like after 4 days or something of me sitting down and doing this search online. But again, this is just the will of Allah, right? So I was like, okay, well, that means I have to absolutely find a Workaway trip. And the first one that I saw was where I'm actually at right now, and it was like a dog sitting. The guy who owns the place had to leave the place, so I'd have the place to myself, and I'd be minding a dog and like looking after his farm and whatever. I was like, that's beautiful. And it was in Sicily, Italy. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds good. And so I kept looking for some other places as well, just searching the site for other places. But this one was definitely the one that was like speaking to me the most. And it was literally the first one that I clicked on. And so I signed up for the membership again on Workaway, and I wrote to this guy and I was like, hey, I don't know if you know this, or like, I don't know if you still see this or need people, but like, because he literally needed someone from the week after, like, from the week, like a week to the day from the day that I sat down and wrote this email to him. And I was like, hi, I don't know if you still need somebody and if you're going to see this, but I'm actually looking for a place and I can be there, and I can be there for the whole duration of the time that you're looking for. And he basically wrote back immediately. It was like, yeah, absolutely. You sound like you'd be a great fit. Let's talk on the phone. And the next day we spoke on the phone and it got planned out. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm driving to Sicily now, because we were like, yeah, that's going to happen. So I sat in the car and I was like, okay, this is definitely different. Like, driving from Spain to Sicily is definitely a trek, and very exhausting. It does cost a bit of money in gas, but also I have to take a ferry and stuff. But I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So I packed up my car again in Spain and I drove to Sicily in Italy. And so that was the first part of this surrender manifestation. Oh my God, this is going to be such a long episode. I hope you got yourself a nice cup of tea or going for a nice long walk, my darling. So anyway, I basically started driving to Sicily, and on the way I was like, I'm actually driving further away, like, than where I was in Spain. If anything was to happen, having to drive all the way back to Denmark and whatever, if anything was to happen from Spain, it's like a 2-day drive if I'm like really driving, and I've done it before, so I know I can. But from Italy, it would take a little bit longer, especially from Sicily, because like I'm really down south in Europe. But anyway, so I was driving and I was just like, okay, this actually feels good, even though my ego has hesitations and stuff and fears and things. But I just went, and when I came here, it was just perfect, and I felt really, really at ease and whatever. And then the next step of my surrender manifestation then happened, because immediately on day one of me waking up in my new home, basically, or like my temporarily new home, one of my dogs got sick. And she had to go to the vet. And I was like, okay, that's nothing. It was just an ear infection. So I took her to the vet. And I paid quite a bit of money to get her. I think she kind of took advantage of me, this one vet. This isn't where I'm at now, by the way. This is another vet. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And then my other dog got sick. And then the other dog got sick again. And then the other dog got sick. So it kind of took turns, constantly taking turns. And honestly, I was like, this was about a month in at this point. And I had been going to the vet, like towards the end, like 3, 4, 5 times a week, I'd be going to the vet. So the first week I went to the first vet who like was the one with the ear infection. And then the second time I was like, I don't really like this vet. So I'm going to drive a little bit further. And I went to another town and I found this other vet and she was absolutely lovely and she spoke English. And so I started going to her. Her name's Jana. And we started, just kind of chatting more and more because I started coming there all the time. So I was like, hi, how are you? How are you today? Oh, you look so pretty, blah, blah, blah. And it was a really difficult time, actually, because one, going to the vet is not cheap. Two, if you have pets and they get sick, you know that it's never easy to watch your pets being sick. And I was starting to think like, oh, I've made a bad decision because it's affecting my pets. And so, this is Allah trying to tell me maybe that I'm not supposed to be here, or like that I've made the wrong decision because they keep getting sick. But at the same time, my intuition, like I was thinking like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Do I have to leave? Is that what Allah is trying to tell me? Do I have to leave this place? But I didn't have anywhere to go. And the only place I had to go was back to Denmark. And I was thinking like the feeling of having to go back to Denmark was physical pain within me. I'm from Denmark and I really don't like Denmark. Sorry if you're in Denmark listening to this. Actually, no, you know why I don't like Denmark. I'm sure you do. As a brown girl, you know I don't like Denmark. But anyway, so I was like, the thought of going back home was really paining me. But at this point, I'd spent pretty much all my money on vet bills. And I was like, I also can't afford this. Something is going wrong here. And then I went into the vet one more day. This time it was one of the cats from the property that had something wrong with him. He had like a urinary tract infection or a block actually. And I went to the vet one more time and she kind of like this time she was like, she had to do like a minor little surgery, nothing too big, like a little thing going in and just kind of helping him release the pee and stuff. And she said to me, actually, would you want to come and help me with this? And I was like, yeah, I would like to, because I'm really interested how you do these things. And so she let me in the back room into the surgery room, and she did the surgery and I was helping her along. And then she was like, oh, just like randomly, have you ever, like, how long are you going to be in Sicily for? And I said, well, I don't know. Like, I'm kind of like just taking things as they come. And she said, okay, well, are you looking for a job here? And I said, I don't know. Why? Why are you asking? She said, well, I actually need somebody to come here and work for me and help me in the clinic. And I was wondering if you'd like it. And I just looked at her and I said, well, I would love to, but I'm not a vet. Like, I have no education in veterinary or even in like other than personal training. Like, I don't know anything about anything. Like, I just studied journalism, and then I did a degree in personal training and health and diet and nutrition. And she was like, that's okay, I can teach you. And I was like, well, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll come in. And so my thought was, I'm going to come and volunteer with her. But she wanted to hire me and give me like a job. And so in that day, she was like, oh, well, while the cat's still recovering, do you want to help me with the next patient? And I was like, yeah, if you don't mind. And so we did another patient. It was a pit bull. He'd got a grass seed up in his nose. So I was there helping. He had to be put under anesthesia because she had to like go into the nose, and I basically helped take the thing out of his nose. Like, I was the one who actually reached in with the little clampy things and took the thing out of the nose and was there for the recovery and all that good stuff. And I was just like, wow, you really just let me come in here. And by the way, guys, I don't speak Italian. I don't speak Italian, and I have no education in veterinary or any knowing of veterinary. And she was just like, I like you. You like your energy. You got good energy. Like, I'll happily teach you. Like, how about you start coming in here and work and all that good stuff, and I'll pay you. And I said, oh, thank you. But like, I don't know anything, so I'm good with just volunteering. She's like, no, I want to pay you for it. So that's how I manifested a job at a veterinary clinic with a beautiful woman who she's a Christian, very Christian. So we're always talking about God, which I also really, really love. And she has her own clinic, and it's just her and I in the clinic, and it's a big, beautiful clinic and whatever. And the surrender manifesting, in case you're wondering here, is that I stopped resisting. Because at this point, I had been crying. loads in my car because I had to drive, like every time I had to drive one of the pets to the vet, I was like crying, like, oh, am I clearly doing something wrong? And I was literally on the verge all the time to tears. And I was like, what is going on? Everything is falling apart. I thought I was on track. I'm trying just to follow what God is leading me to. And it's, for whatever reason, it just constantly isn't working. And what happened before this meeting was, before this conversation with the vet and that day, was I said to myself, and I made the decision, God is trying to tell you something. Listen. And I sat in my car, and I remember this because I had to drive to the vet in the middle of the night. And I sat in the car and I was crying, and I was just like, God, what are you trying to tell me? I don't know what it is. I can't move back to Denmark. I would be miserable, and I don't trust that you want me to be miserable. Just show me what it is that you want from me. What is the next step? I want to follow what you're putting in front of me, but I can't figure out what it is, and I can't see the direction, and I'm too stuck in myself. Tell me what to do. What is the next step? And I was literally just pleading with Allah and being like, tell me what to do. I am so ready and willing to take that step, and I will trust, but I don't know what it is. But if this is the way, and if it's because you need me to say goodbye to one of my animals, like I was at that point where I was like, if it's because you want one of them to die and you want to prepare me for it or something, I just need to understand where I'm going with this, because I don't know what I'm doing. And I was literally a mess. And that was the moment, because I literally said that prayer and I was like, I'm releasing it. I'm like, I just don't know. And I'm not going to fight it anymore if it's because you want one of the animals to die, but then I just need you to basically take them. Like, I can't keep doing this. I'm laughing because it's such an uncomfortable conversation, especially if you know you've got pets and you know how that conversation is, right? Because you know they're going to die at some point, but it's so uncomfortable. And so I was really uncomfortable, and I was just pleading with Allah. And then literally, I think it's like 2 days after that conversation, or 3 days after that conversation with Allah, because I felt that energy shift within myself where I was like more relaxed about it. And I was like, I just got to figure it out. Just got to figure it out. That's what it is, right? No, not 2 or 3 days. Sorry. About a week or so after. What am I saying? About a week after. But I basically released like that energy within me where I was constantly trying to resist what was being put down in front of me. And I just leaned into that tawakkul, like where I was like, I trust that if my next part of my chapter is because you don't want me to have my animals with me, but then that's fine. But I just like, I needed to get to that realization where I was like, you're fighting something, Zara. But what I was fighting was clearly because I was trying not to go to the vet, right? I was trying to be like, no, they're fine. And essentially they weren't. They needed help. Like, they're fine now today, by the way, in case you're wondering. All the animals are healthy and living and happy. But I was fighting it, and I was trying to resist that they kept getting sick. And in reality, Allah was trying to put me in front of my next opportunity. Allah was trying to introduce me to the vet. And Allah knew that one meeting was not enough. Allah knew that I needed to see her several times so that we could build up a relationship. We could start talking, that we could have that rapport. We could start, like, to the point where during like the consultations, we're talking about God and, oh, what's your boyfriend's name? Like, to me, because I'm... my boyfriend's name is dogs and chickens and cats. I'm happy with this. Alhamdulillah, no headache. But like, her boyfriend, and he also worked there. He's a surgeon in veterinary. And so we started talking. And so it was just so like, Allah knew. And I had to just surrender to that will instead of constantly trying to resist it and fight it and be like, no, my pets are not sick. And dragging it on, because that's what I was doing. I was dragging it on because the moment something was happening, I didn't necessarily go immediately. I was trying to avoid it because there's that horrible realization of like, oh, what if she tells me I have to put my dog down or whatever. And Allah was just trying to put me in front of my next opportunity. And I was resisting it until the moment when I said, I'm not going to resist it anymore. I'm just going to, if Allah keeps making my pet sick, there's a reason for it. So I'm going to keep going to the vet, and I'm going to keep paying even though I don't have the money anymore. I had to call my mum and dad. Yeah, I had to call my mum and them like, listen, I just spent a few €100 that I don't have anymore. And it was like every week. And I was like, can you please just lend me some money, because I don't know what I'm doing. And my mom and dad at this point were also like, hey, maybe you should just come home. And I was like, no, that doesn't feel aligned. That feels even worse than staying here and paying money to get my vets checked up and whatever. But Allah was just trying to get me in front of the opportunity. And that was with Jannah. And I literally had to meet her all these times for her and I to create this relationship where we trusted each other, and she saw in me the passion that I have for animals. And she said to me, I kind of saw it in you, like your eyes, you're looking, you're trying to understand what's going on, and I want that. Like, I need somebody who's so interested in this, and I just like your energy, and I want to teach you. So that's been what's been going on, you know. And then I was like, oh, I need to find a new apartment. Sorry, girls, this story is almost over. Don't worry. I was like, I need to find a new place to stay. And I was looking for apartments, and I couldn't find anything that wanted pets in the city where I'm going to be working. And then Gianna turned around one day and she said, oh, by the way, I have a studio right behind the clinic. Why don't you live there? I was like, what do you mean? She said, yeah, I own a studio apartment right behind the clinic, and it's empty, and I think you should move in. I mean, we're still renovating it, but I think it will be a beautiful place for you and your dogs to stay. And so the surrendering continues, and I've just been continuing to surrender to Allah's will. And while in my mind, and this is again with the surrendering here, coming back to the topic at hand, I was looking for a place with a guest room, maybe 2 guest rooms, because I was like, I need my family to come and visit me. And it's not because I need a great place to stay or like a big place to stay. It's because I know my family's going to come and visit. And so I was looking for a place where they could come and stay with me. But I couldn't find anything like in that size. I could find it within my budget, but nothing that would allow two dogs to come with me. And so immediately when she said studio, my head, my reasoning, my ego said, oh, I don't want a studio because then I can't have my family over. But then immediately I clocked on what I was doing. I was like, you're resisting a blessing. You're resisting Allah making it easy. You're resisting the way that Allah wants you to go. Like, Allah is literally serving up the whole life that I've had here in Sicily on a silver platter for me. And every step of the way, almost, I've been resisting it, because that's what we do as humans. This is what we do, right? And alhamdulillah, I've been able to wake up from that, and I've been able to receive the blessings because I stopped getting in my own way. But this is what all of us are doing when we're wanting to do the surrender manifestation, is that we keep preventing the blessings from coming because we don't want to let go of our own expectation. So my expectation was not to come to Sicily and get a job in a veterinary clinic, despite not speaking Italian and not having a degree in veterinary at all, or any knowledge of it at all, or any experience in it at all. I didn't have any of those expectations. I was thinking, I'm going to live that, sweet entrepreneur, work whenever you can life and do the thing that I've been doing so far. And Allah was like, no, you need more stability. There needs to be some type of pattern in your life, a little bit more routine. And that's what this job has given me. And also what it's given me is friends. My therapist would laugh at me so hard if she heard me say that, because she's been trying to tell me, because I've been like in self-isolation mode for the longest time, and she's been like, you need people in your life, and I'm like, nah, I'm good. And then here I am, and I'm making friends with Italian people, and they're lovely, so sweet. I'm creating a whole life here, and again, it's all been served up by Allah on a silver platter for me, and all I had to do was just say yes and. Like, yes, and it's that improv thing. Yes, and accepting it and moving into it. And then just opening up and saying, I'm ready for the next step, Allah. When you're ready to give it to me, I'm ready for the next step. When you're ready to give it to me. And so far, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I have been now in Sicily for 3 months, I think. 2 months. 2 months, 3 months. I can't remember. Whatever. The point is, I have been here for a little bit now. 2 months. 2.5. Whatever, Zara. It's besides the point. And in that short amount of time, have been able to establish a life here. So I'm going to stay in Sicily. And I've been able to do that by surrendering to Allah's will and not questioning it all the time. Well, I was in the beginning. I mean, clearly, she cried in the car. I'm like, why? But the point is, I released it. I said, I trust that whatever is going on here, you're doing it because something needs to be done. Even if I'm not picking it up as you're putting it down, I'm so slow, because that's what we are. We're slow in understanding Allah's will most of the time. And I just was like, I'm just going to go with it. I'm just going to run with it, because I will not question Allah in anything. I do because I'm a person and I have my ego. So of course I'm going to question in myself, but I'm not going to let me questioning Allah's will in my mind, or the little hesitations and fears and doubts, get in the way of my actions and accepting the things when they come to me. So surrender manifesting is basically when Allah puts something in front of you, stop resisting it. Surrender into it, move into it. And again, as I said, I can't remember, sometime in the beginning or sometime in the middle, it's about really learning to understand yourself. Because at any moment in this, I could have resisted and I could have stopped the blessings from coming. That moment when I was sitting in the car, before that moment when I was crying to Allah and I was like, please, I'm trying to understand what you're putting down, but I'm too slow. I need you to come in with something a little bit more concrete because I don't know what's going on. Right before that, I was speaking to my sister on the phone, my little sister, and I said, I think I have to come back home because I can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing this. I'm so sad and I can't afford it. I'm using all my money on veterinary bills. I don't even have money to travel back right now. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I just don't know what I'm going to do. And then that happened and I had to sit in the car and cry to Allah. So I almost pulled the plug. Because I was resisting. I almost pulled the plug because I was allowing my fears and hesitations and doubts resist what Allah was trying to put in front of me. And I was trying to resist it by resisting that in the test there is turmoil. In the test, Allah will test us with the things that we love the most, and Allah knows that mine are my animals, right? But it's also in that there is the biggest blessings. So when the test is coming and quitting doesn't feel right either, so you're going in a direction and it's not like stuff is happening and you almost feel like what is going on, and the whole thing is falling apart, but quitting doesn't feel aligned or intuitively the right decision, then maybe that is the test that Allah just wants you to up level from that point. He's trying to teach you something. He wants you to release. He wants you to stop resisting. He wants you to surrender and do that in that moment, because after that moment, when you've then surrendered to it and you said, I'm trying to make more money, but I keep being served high bills, keep paying the bills and say Alhamdulillah. Keep paying it until you, as I said, I literally had to call my mum and dad and be like, can you spot me some money, because I've spent all my money on my animals, right? At 37, Alhamdulillah, I have a mum and dad who have the finances and means to be able to do that for me in that moment. But I had to really humble myself there, because I don't want to ask my mum and dad for money, especially when I'm out traveling and stuff, right? So, and I don't want them to worry about me. And I really had to be like, this is not a fun phone call to make, but I feel like it's necessary, because the alternative would make me really, really sad and depressed. And now I have a life in Italy. And it's not come by the easiest means, but it's come by me surrendering back to Allah. It's come by me having tawakkul. It's come by me saying and praying to Allah that I want His will, because I'm lost. I don't know what my next steps are. So I will trust that He will put me in the position where the next chapter of my life is going to be. And it led me to Sicily and a veterinary clinic. And it's led me to a beautiful, I've seen it. It looks like a little cave. I can't wait to move in there, and I'll show it to you over on TikTok and Instagram and all that good stuff. So make sure you follow me there at Manifesting Muslimah. So when I move in, I'll show you the place, and it's like a little cave. Those cave style studios. It's so cute. Anyway, I just wanted to share that experience with you. I know I've promised you guys for a while now that I wanted to share how I manifested the vet job and things like that. And I want you to really take away from this that, number one, while I knew what I wanted, there was a massive release, and surrender. My plan was moving to the UK, and now I'm in Sicily, right? And there's a surrendering that is not for now. That is not for now. That might come in the future, but is not for now. Okay, so I had to surrender to that idea and my expectations of what the next chapter of my life might look like. And then I surrendered when Allah said, keep bringing your animals to the vet. Keep bringing your animals to the vet. Yes, I was fighting it a long time and along the way, But eventually when I stopped resisting and I just kept coming in there, and the last few times that I came in there, I was just making jokes about it with Gianna, and I was just like, hi, it's me again, did you miss me and stuff, and we just had just kicking it and whatever. And that was again like the last little step before the manifestation of the next step was going to come. And in all of this, while I've known what I wanted, while I haven't been clear in like, this is the exact thing that I wanted, I have continuously released Allah and said, this part of my life I'm going to just call surrender to Allah. Surrender to Allah's will. And I know what I don't want, and I know what I do want. I want freedom. I want good friends. I want a fulfilling job. I want the money to support myself. I want satisfaction in my job. I want to be able to still do, manifesting Muslim and all of that good stuff that I do on the side. And all of that, without even vocalizing it, but just knowing it within myself, Allah took care of. And I didn't have to micromanage it along the way. I didn't have to say, but make sure it's done this way, but make sure it comes from this avenue, make sure that this person's involved or that person's out of my life. I didn't have to do any of that because I just surrendered it from that place of knowing that Allah knows better than I do, and that Allah will take care of it even when I don't know how it's going to happen. And that is how you use surrender manifestation. As I said, this is, I would probably argue, again, like probably the hardest step when it comes to law of attraction. And this step is crucial for anybody using the law of attraction from an Islamic perspective. You cannot, even if you lean more into the dua aspect, you still have to use the surrender and the submission to Allah. You still have to let it go to Allah and trust that Allah's will is far superior than your own. So this is definitely not a step that you're going to want to miss if you're using the law of attraction from an Islamic perspective. But it is, if you want to go into sort of like really leading into this, excuse me, I'm going to turn off there's 37 degrees outside and I'm sitting here feeling all like stuffy nose because I've got the aircon on and I'm freezing now. So silly. But using the surrender manifestation and leaning more into surrender manifestation is probably, I would argue, the hardest way I've manifested so far. Not the hardest in terms of like, it was the hardest for it to come. It's come quicker than anything has ever probably come in my life in terms of manifestation, but it's the hardest emotionally. It can be the hardest, most draining, sort of like in that moment when you're going through it, because Allah will take your surrender. Allah will take that moment when you release and He'll say, you're ready? We're going to go for a ride. And He will take you from A to B so quickly. You cannot keep up. Like, it's been difficult for me to keep up, but of course you can keep up because Allah will only give you what you can handle, right? But it's to the point where it's like, oh, you're almost going to break. But of course you don't break because Allah doesn't give you to the point where you breaks. But it is such a powerful way to manifest, but it is definitely not for the weak. It is not for somebody who don't know themselves enough, who doesn't understand how to understand their own intuition, recognize themselves, their fear thoughts versus intuitive thoughts, so on and so forth. So if you want to try and lean into surrender manifestation, I would either say make sure that you be friends with yourself, show yourself all the good grace and all the good stuff. And if you need, then definitely work with a coach. I'm obviously available, but like generally like work with other people who are available and can guide you in case you're about to like lose that good will to sort of like continue moving in the right direction, because you will be tested when you're doing the surrender manifestation. But the outcome of those tests, the outcome of that turmoil is blessing upon blessing upon blessing upon blessing. And I've got just another blessing just yesterday, as I'm sitting now and recording, and just yesterday I got another blessing from Allah, so unexpected, that's definitely again just going to manifest into the bigger vision, the bigger dream that I've had in mind of what it is that I want in my life. And I didn't do anything for it. I didn't do anything for it. All of these things, again, as I said, is when you use surrender manifestation, you are literally asking Allah to serve it up to you on a silver platter, but you're also agreeing to not resisting it. And that is definitely such a hard step, but so incredibly rewarding and fulfilling when you come out on the other side. Okay, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because I know that there's probably a lot of questions on this. So feel free to reach out to me, leave it in the comments here on Spotify, reach out to me on Instagram or on TikTok. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your questions. I feel like there could probably be a part 2 of this about surrender manifestation, where I'm basically just answering your questions on this subject. So feel free, if that is the case. I'm so happy to talk more about this. And yeah, I think this has by far definitely been the longest episode that I have recorded, but inshallah it'll have all the information that you need in order to take that next step and either fully go into surrender manifestation and leaning into that aspect of you manifesting the life that you desire, or understanding the step further, even if your journey takes you more in towards dua manifesting or gratitude manifesting or whatever it might be. But either way, I hope that this episode taught you and shared some information about what you can do next in your surrendering that'll elevate your manifesting levels. All right, my darlings, thank you so much, as usual, for listening to this podcast. I love and appreciate you so much, and I will see you in the next episode. But until then, my darling friend, please don't forget to live in love.